Be Michael.
Well, it can be incredibly dangerous. Before we have military-to-military coordination, or currently we have military-to-military coordination with the Russians. That was deconflicting. Basically, we were taking ISIS on in the east, and the Russians were taking on al-Qaeda-backed groups and other militias in the west. But now that everybody's decided that they want this area where ISIS is withdrawing from, we're going to start operating in the same space, and who comes out on top remains to be seen.
Well, one wrong move again, and it could be, well, we won't let the imagination run here. Michael, thank you so much.
Absolutely, Bill. But people in that area respect strength, and we have to stand firm.
Former Green Beret Michael Waltz. Thank you, sir. Good to have you on with instant analysis of that ongoing story. Here's another, Shannon.
Breaking news now on a massive investigation in Massachusetts. We're getting word that a man believed to be armed and dangerous has broken into a mall this morning and barricaded himself inside. We will keep monitoring that situation as we also continue to get new details out of London on yet another terror attack. The driver of a van plowing into a crowd of worshipers leaving a mosque, injuring 10 people. One man died at the scene of that attack. Police arrested the 48-year-old driver of the van and charged him with attempted murder. Witnesses describe an horrific scene.
As we came outside the mosque, there was people screaming. It was like chaos. It was like a horror movie. There was people laying on the floor. There was blood on the floor.
I saw a lot of fatality on the ground, People moaning. I've never heard people scream and moan of that nature. Some wasn't moaning, some was just on the floor, as though they were dead.
Benjamin Hall is live in London with the very latest story. What can you tell us at this hour, Benjamin?
Yeah, hi Shannon. We'll look at another attack in the UK. This is the second attack in 2 weeks, 4 over 4 months. And as with 3 others, we have seen the use of a vehicle here to mow people down. But what is so strikingly different this time is that this was an attack on Muslims. And the government's already saying that they are treating it as a terrorist attack and that the counter-terrorism units will be investigating. It began just after midnight early this morning outside a Muslim centre in North London, Finchley. It's a very diverse, multicultural area here. And it happened as people were just finishing their Ramadan prayers and coming out onto the street. It does seem as if the attacker knew when the prayers were ending and he was waiting there, revving his engine, leaving the road and striking them down. Muslim leaders have now called this a hate crime and they've asked the public to stay calm as well as trying to avoid any further divisions within the community. Police have arrested the driver, as you say, a 48-year-old man. He was wrestled to the ground by 2 bystanders until the police arrived, and those 2 men are now being called heroes. And eyewitnesses have also reported that he said a number of times, "I've done my bit and I want to kill Muslims." Here's an eyewitness report.
I saw at least 8 people on the floor, and so forth. But whatever happened there was done in a very vindictive way. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't that the person was drunk and the van went out of control.
And of course, there has been a big political response already. I don't know if you can see behind me, but the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is just currently giving a message at the moment. We've seen Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition leader. We've seen Theresa May here as well. And we heard Theresa May speak earlier. Here's what she said.
This was an attack on Muslims near their place of worship. And like all terrorism, in whatever form, it shares the same fundamental goal. It seeks to drive us apart. This morning, we have seen a sickening attempt to destroy those freedoms.
And video has also emerged showing the attacker apparently blowing kisses to passers-by as he was removed in the police van. Now, not much is known about him yet. He was taken in for a psychiatric check, but he's going to be released from hospital and then charged after that. But, a lot of people here trying to reduce tensions. We have heard people calling it a possible revenge attack, but they're playing down those stories. And, of course, people saying that an attack like this plays right into the hands of ISIS. It helps sow divisions. So very much being felt on the streets of London, this unease at the moment. And we'll keep bringing you the latest as we hear from it. Back to you guys.
All right. Benjamin Hall in London. Thank you very much.
Another big story moving today. President Trump's legal team out in force. Jay Sekulow appearing on all the Sunday shows, repeatedly stressing that President Trump is not being investigated.
There's been no notification of any investigation. Nothing's changed since James Comey said the president was not a target or a subject of investigation. Nothing's changed.
John Roberts, live from the North Lawn to begin yet another week. John, good morning. What is the latest on this investigation as it stands this morning?
Bill, good morning to you. The president's legal team was telling us on Friday that the president was not acknowledging in that tweet that he was under investigation, where he said, I'm under investigation and by the person that required me, or at least recommended that I fire James being there. Again, no case for obstruction of justice because of the fact that a member of the Department of Justice, high-ranking level, the Deputy Attorney General, recommended that the president replace Comey. Here's what Sekulow said just a short time ago.
The President of the United States takes action after receiving a memorandum from his Attorney General, a letter actually from his Attorney General, and a memorandum from his Deputy Attorney General. In that letter, there's a recommendation for the removal of James Comey. He had been thinking about that as well. He then takes action that they recommend to remove James Comey. And now, according to the Washington Post theory, he's under investigation for taking the action that the Department of Justice told him to take. So this whole thing, if you look at it in that way and you just lay the case out like that, there's nothing to investigate.
Sekulow also suggested yesterday, appearing on Fox News Sunday, that the president may have something to say about the notion that he might have some tapes of conversations that he had with James Comey here at the White House and on the telephone. So we'll wait and see if that happens. Some other news coming out of the White House. The first son-in-law, Jared Kushner bill, is going to be headed to the Middle East on Wednesday to try to push the Middle East peace process along. He'll be meeting with Israeli officials in Jerusalem, Palestinian officials in Ramallah. The president's chief international negotiator, Jason Greenblatt, is leaving for the region today. So there's a real push on to try to take advantage, Bill, of what they believe is a window here where everybody is talking about peace and maybe they can get something done.
Top executives, meanwhile, too, from the technology world. They will be at the White House today. John, and what's that all about?
It's a real who's who of the tech industry. They've met here before. They're going to meet here again today, a 4-hour session, 10 working groups in total. Here's some of the people that will be participating in the President's American Technology Council. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Safra Catz of Oracle, Tim Cook from Apple, Brian Krzanich from Intel, Ginny Rometty of IBM, and Eric Schmidt, who's the CEO of Alphabet. Some of the things that they'll be talking about today, a way to improve out-of-date government IT systems, a way to expand the use and integration of electronic medical records, H-1B visas. This is a big issue for tech companies. They want to try to bring in people from outside of the country, although a lot of people claim it's just a way to get cheap labor here into the United States. They'll also be talking about artificial intelligence. So the president's got a lot going on his plate today, and we'll wait and see if we get more information from Sean Spicer this afternoon, Bill, as to whether or not the president will, in fact, be talking about this idea of whether or not there were tapes of his conversations with Comey.
Okay, wow, that could be important stuff, too. John, thank you. John Roberts on the North Lawn there. So the plate is full already on a Monday morning as we get rolling here.
That's where they want to focus on the agenda, what they're still trying to get done. And, of course, we'll keep an eye on it.
Yes.
All right, well, the Trump team is making it clear the president's legislative agenda, they say, is on track.
When he says drain the swamp, it's not just get rid of all the crocodiles in the water that we don't need there. It's also moving at a different pace. And so we hope that the Congress will do it. I actually feel very positive that we'll get health care and taxes passed this year.
Some say that's pretty ambitious. Will they get a health care bill through the Senate by summer recess? We're going to put that question to Senator John Barrasso.
Also, President Trump just weighing in on a high-stakes election for a House seat in Georgia. Everybody's watching this. Georgia Senator David Perdue in a moment on why this race is so important for both sides. We'll explain that.
And new details on a sad story from this weekend. The U.S. Navy now identifying 7 sailors killed when their destroyer slammed into a cargo ship. What we're learning about the victims and the latest on exactly what happened.
It's very hard. It's my only child. It's all I have. He was trying to, but all comms were down. He was trying to call me then. I thank God that who wants to hear their child?
And there are plenty of changes that we need to make to the Affordable Care Act. But doing this behind closed doors is actually not what we did with the Affordable Care Act. So I'm hopeful that this would be an opportunity, given what we're seeing across the country with the prices of prescription drugs, where we could work on that together.
That's a Democrat, Amy Klobuchar, senator on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, saying a good way to capitalize on the unity in Congress for a week anyway would be collaborating on health care. But is unity enough to get this done? Wyoming Senator, Republican John Barrasso, chairman of the Senate Republican Policy Committee, also a doctor, and it's great to have you back with us, especially in person here in New York. She says we didn't do it behind closed doors. Republicans should not do the same. Let's address that in a moment. But first, this whole theme about unity in Congress. Is there an opportunity, or is it too temporary for that?
Well, I think there is an opportunity, you know, in a bipartisan way. We passed a sanctions bill last week against Iran, against Russia, and unifying our position also in support of NATO and our NATO alliance. And that passed 98-2. Rand Paul voted against it, Bernie Sanders voted against it, but that is a significant bipartisan vote to say we're going to focus certainly on American security, and our sanctions against Iran and Russia are a critical part of that.
So that answer suggests that there's an opportunity here, but knowing where these two sides are on health care, is that truly realistic?
Well, I want to work with people on both sides of the aisle on this. Amy Klobuchar and I work closely together. We've discussed health care, but you've got to take a look at the fact that the pain of Obamacare is getting worse. The insurance markets are collapsing. For many people around the country, can't buy insurance from anyone because there's no one willing to sell in so many counties across the country. On the other hand, the Democrats in California, the state Senate has passed a basically single-payer plan. The cost $400 billion, which is over twice the entire general fund of the state of California. So that is not realistic where the left of the Democrat Party is trying to lead things.
And I know you're not going to go that way, but Mitch McConnell over the weekend indicated that he has a July 4th deadline to get things through the Senate. That's less than 2 weeks. Will that happen?
I believe we're going to vote before the 4th of July recess on a health care plan, a repeal and replacement of Obamacare. Every Republican is trying to get to yes. There are some differences of opinion on specific details of this, but you may have seen Chuck Schumer, the Democrat leader, sent a letter to Mitch McConnell on Friday afternoon saying, let's get together, because he admits now that Obamacare is not providing affordable or accessible coverage or care. And as a doctor, I focus on the word care much more than I do the word coverage.
We saw what happened in Ohio, and as you mentioned, you know, 20 counties not having coverage, et cetera. Marco Rubio, your colleague, put it this way right now when it comes to the calendar and deadlines coming up fast.
That's got to work its way through a committee. It's got to work its way through floor action. Every senator will have a right to offer amendments to change the law and have input that way. So this is part of a process. This is just the first step in the process.
Sounds like a lot.
There's a lot to be done.
What, 10 working days, I believe it is?
There's a lot to be done. I'm confident and committed to getting this to the floor, and I'm working hard to make sure we get the votes to pass it. You need at least 50 with the vice president breaking the tie. But if you take a step back and say, why are we doing this? It's because premiums have exploded, doubled in the last 4 years. Choices have gotten less, but we're focused on protecting people with pre-existing conditions. My wife, Bobby, is a breast cancer survivor. As a doctor and a husband, I know how important it is for people with pre-existing conditions. And Medicaid, long-term, we have to stabilize that and strengthen it so that it can continue. And I always felt when I was in the state Senate in Wyoming that the best way we could do that is if the states had the opportunity to get that money and make the right decisions. We could have covered and helped many more people at home if we didn't have the one-size-fits-all coming out of Washington.
You said a lot there. You said you'll get a vote on it. I don't know if it'll pass, but you're predicting passage as well. So let's see. That's a high hurdle.
I'm focused on passing.
You have 3 Republican senators who are on the fence about a lot of this stuff. What is it? Rand Paul, it's Mike Lee, it's Ted Cruz. We will watch them as they move through it. And also watch the president. When he said the House bill is mean, what does that do to your negotiations?
Well, I think what the president was saying to us is we're happy the Senate is writing a bill of their own. Make it in a way that we can help people get the care they need from a doctor they choose at lower costs, and we're working closely with him. We had 15 Republican senators with him at the White House. Vice President Pence has been to so many of our Committee of the Whole meetings. He comes every week to our policy lunch, is very actively involved in the process. So, you know, and he as a governor did such a great job with Medicaid.
Understood.
States have to have the flexibility
I'm out
to do
of time, but the Democratic senator that we let in with said you're doing this not in public view. What do you say to that charge?
Under reconciliation, the process we're using, every senator is going to be allowed to offer amendments on the floor of the Senate. Every member, Republican and Democrat, is going to be a wide open process. So when they read it, they take a look. If they don't like it, they can bring an amendment and try to change it in a way that shifts it one way or the other. I'm focused on trying to get it done.
The clock is running, as you well know. Senator, thank you very much for your time here. You bet. John Barrasso, the Republican from Wyoming. Shannon, what's next?
Well, we've got breaking news out of Moscow. The Kremlin issuing a stark warning to the U.S. today after the Pentagon shoots down a Syrian jet. Member of the Senate Armed Services Committee joins us next live on this latest provocation. This is a Fox News alert. Moscow issuing a strong warning now to the U.S. Russian officials warning they will treat U.S.-led coalition planes and drones west of the Euphrates River as military targets. It's a threatening response to the U.S. after it shot down a Syrian fighter jet this weekend. A lot more to that story. Joining me now, Republican Senator from Georgia, David Perdue, member of the Armed Services Committee. Welcome. Good to have you with us this morning. What do you make of Russia's pushback to what's happened?
Well, this is to be expected, but to be fair, we actually warned them ahead of this incident. We called Russia, we'd set up the conversation, and it did not forestall this, so we had no choice. We operation at air. I think this is a similar situation when Turkey shot down the Russian plane for violating their airspace. So this is where cooler heads, I hope, will win the day here in the next few days.
Does this suggest, though, a shift in strategy by this administration in how we're going to deal with these threats? Because we've long said to the forces we're trying to back there in Syria, we do have your back. This seems like a very concrete example now.
Well, this is exactly what we've been saying we would do, and this is the first example where we've had to do it. We put special operators in there to help train and assist. We're trying to equip in a way that will help. But this is a way that sends a message not only to Russia, but to Bashar al-Assad. No more chemical weapons, and we're going to defend the people on the ground.
Do you worry about the constant conversation about this being a proxy war, with Iran being involved, Russia involved, the U.S. involved, a lot of powers in that region involved?
Well, it's very confused. You have Iran, firing missiles just over the weekend. You've got 6 or 7 factions in there. You've got terrorists, Hezbollah, Hamas is in there. This is a very confused battle space. But the bigger issue in my mind is once this is settled, and we will get this settled eventually, is what do you do with Syria? It's a non-state today. Bashar al-Assad's got to go. I think even Russia now is beginning to realize that that's the case.
Yeah, and one of our earlier guests, Michael Wallace, was talking about the fact that it's an oil-rich region, and so there are going to be a lot of players interested in the outcome, the post-Assad, whatever it is.
No question, but the economy has got to be rebuilt. I mean, we need a global Marshall Plan. There's 65 million refugees walking the face of the earth today, many of them in that region. We've got to find a way to give those people a reason to go home and have a reasonable life once this is over.
I want to talk to you, too, about what's going on in your home state, a big election tomorrow. And a lot of people think it's a referendum on how the president is doing in his first few months in office. What's at stake there? A race I've heard described as one of the most expensive in history.
Well, it is. It was a special election, so when Tom Price assumed the secretary position. But, Karen Handel is going to win. We just have to get the Republican vote out.
It's pretty tight.
It is, but this Democrat is not who he says he is. And people in Georgia begin to figure that out after a while. There's been enough money spent to expose that. But I think the people of Georgia are recognizing what President Trump has done. He won the state handily. He won this district. And as a matter of fact, I believe Karen Handel is going to win. She's the best person. She's from that district, and nobody knows that district better than Karen Handel.
But you know that both sides are very energized right now.
They are.
So what does it say? A win for either side?
Well, I think if the Democrats win, I think it's a wake-up call, and particularly in that district, because I think that district, first of all, President Trump did not come to Georgia and campaign. We advised him not to do that because he was going to win the state big. So he never had a chance to defend himself against a lot of the accusations that were made. That's number one. Number two, this is not a referendum on Georgia. Georgia is not moving to a red state or blue state. And I believe that this election is going to prove that Tuesday.
Meantime, there's a lot of work going on back in D.C. You guys, as Senator Barrasso was just here talking about healthcare, you've got tax reform, debt ceiling, all kinds of things. But I know that one of your things that you want to really push for is getting back to regular order on things like the budget. It hasn't been that way for years. How do you make it change?
Oh, Shannon. We need an hour to talk about this. I mean, this budget process is broken. It's not worked but 4 times in 42 years, all before 1980. The Budget Act of 74 is broken. We've had 178 continuing resolutions. Continuing resolutions hamstring our military.
These are just short-term measures.
Absolutely.
So
continuing resolution just gets us passed. And then, by the way, we only have 37 working days between now and the end of this fiscal year. So we're guaranteed we're not going to have regular order appropriation. We've only averaged 2.5 appropriation bills a year over the last 43 years to fund the government. We should appropriate 12 appropriation bills every year.
We can't do that at home. How does it work in Washington? I mean, we all have to have budgets and pay bills and know what our forecast is going to be.
Well, here's how it works. We go to China and we borrow every dollar we spend on discretionary spending in this country. That's what's happened over the last 8 years. We're going to add $10 trillion over the next decade to a $20 trillion debt today. That's what the current CBO baseline budget says. But the runaway costs here are in the mandatory, the $3 trillion of our $4 trillion expenditures.
Well, we're going to watch and see, because I know there's a growing movement to make that change in Washington. We'll see if you get some traction. Senator, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you. Bill?
Shannon, thank you. 9:29 now on a Monday morning as we monitor the latest developments on another attack in London. We'll bring you details on that. And breaking news on a controversial new bill that would force the police department in the major U.S. city that critics say would give the playbook to terrorists. What about that? Former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis is live to address it in a matter of moments. Shannon.
And Congressman Steve Scalise still in serious condition after getting shot during a baseball practice. We're live from the hospital to tell you what doctors now say about his recovery.
Also, a growing number of lawmakers. They say it's time for them to protect themselves. Should members of Congress be allowed to carry a gun? Fair and balanced debate on that minutes away.
When we're in Washington, D.C., once we're off the Capitol Hill grounds complex, we're still congressmen, senators, we're still high-profile targets, but we have absolutely no way to defend ourselves because of Washington, D.C.'s rather restrictive gun law.
Leader Steve Scalise said to be improving, his condition upgraded from critical to serious over the weekend. Certainly good news for him after undergoing at least 3 operations. Ellison Barber back live at the MedStar Washington Hospital Center with an update from there. And how's he doing? Good morning.
Well, as you said, good morning to you. As you said, he's doing a lot better than he was a few days ago, but he is still in serious condition. On Wednesday, when Scalise came to this hospital, he was reportedly in shock. Doctors say he was immediately taken into surgery. He had multiple surgeries since then, including one on Saturday. After that surgery, the hospital said that the Louisiana congressman, quote, continues to show signs of improvement. He is more responsive and is speaking with his loved ones. Scalise suffered 1 gunshot wound to the left hip. He was shot with a rifle. Doctors call it a transpelvic wound because the bullet traveled across Scalise's pelvis, fracturing bones and injuring internal organs. Doctors said that he lost a significant amount of blood and is not out of the woods just yet.
Initial period is about hemorrhage control. And I feel like we've made a lot of progress about that, and hopefully that is not going to be our biggest enemy any longer. Other things to worry about include infections and other complications that come about from intensive care.
One thing that seems to be a good sign is his Twitter account says that Scalise spent part of the weekend cheering for the LSU Tigers in the College World Series. Scalise went and graduated from LSU himself. That Twitter account also released a Father's Day message that included photos with Scalise and his children, telling people to cherish their loved ones. So Scalise spent the weekend here cheering for LSU, but outside of this hospital area, Bill, it seems that a lot of people are still cheering for him and sending a lot of well wishes this way.
Indeed we are. Thanks, Ellison Barber, working with landscapers there today at the hospital. Well
Sorry
done.
about that.
Thank you. It's okay. Thanks.
Well, and as Congressman Scalise continues to recover, some lawmakers now say they would feel a lot safer if they were allowed to carry guns for their own protection.
I'm going to be introducing legislation this week to do this, is to allow a congressman to carry a sidearm, should they so desire.
That's a debate that we're going to continue to have, but I think it's an important debate to have. This is a piece of shrapnel from a madman who came to politically kill innocent people. This is the reminder that all of us have, that we have to take a step back in this country. We have to tone down this rhetoric, and we've got to come together as a nation, as Americans, and say enough is enough.
Joining me now to discuss, Katie Pavlich, editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. Also with us, Marianne Marsh, former senior advisor to Secretary John Kerry. Good to have you both.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, Marianne, I'll start with you. There's plenty of protection for these guys on Capitol Hill. We all know anytime you go up there just how stringent the security is, but many of them are saying the minute they leave Capitol Hill, they feel like high-profile target themselves on that perimeter.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to increase access to guns, including for congressmen. But if you're going to make that argument, then you need to support a national standard of gun ownership. Let's have a baseline that everybody has to have, like universal background checks across the country, and have everybody be qualified for that, not just members of Congress. They should run under the rules everybody else is. So if you want to increase access to guns and you're a member of Congress, then you need to support a uniform, universal national policy that allows people to be subjected to that across the board. That might make sense. Again, I'm not sure it's the best time to be making that argument and trying to show people that at a time when guns seem to be more prevalent, more access to guns is more prevalent, more violent acts with guns are more prevalent. But if you're going to do that, let's make sure everybody plays under the same rules and do it there.
Let's bring in Katie, because there's a lot to respond to. I'll just leave it there.
In the words of Rand Paul, if there hadn't been the security guards there, the Capitol Police, at the field, it would have been a massacre. And the only reason why that shooting stopped is because 2 people with firearms were able to take out the assailant and the attacker. This is a no-brainer. Absolutely, congressmen should be able to carry firearms with a permit on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And this has been done before. In Texas, anybody with a regular concealed carry permit can walk into the state legislature with the firearm, whether you're a constituent or a lawmaker, and pass through security, bypass security as a result. So they've had no issues there at a time when congressmen and regular people feel like they are vulnerable. It's about being prepared, not being paranoid, and absolutely everybody should be allowed to carry concealed in these areas.
Well, and Marianne, I mean, we're talking about 535 members of Congress, all kinds of other cabinet officials and Supreme Court justices. I mean, there's no way to make sure that there is paid security for every single one of these people. Is this a workable solution for you with some of what Katie talked about? I mean, obviously, getting a permit entails a lot of things, and those tend to be the lowest crime, most law-abiding people in our societies, because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, let's be clear. I mean, every one of those people that you just named works in probably one of the safest workplaces in America every single day, because the people who are paid to protect them, like the security detail from the U.S. Capitol Police,
but what about
did
once
such an
they
admirable
leave those
job.
areas? That's the question.
Okay, so again, we have a patchwork quilt of regulations across this country that not only varies from state to state, but city and town. So if you want to do this, then let's have one uniform national standard, because people come from every state, every city and town to serve in the Capitol. Let's have everyone have one standard. And the last point here is, in years now, when almost every governor now travels with a huge security detail, mayors travel with huge security details. The more we increase those security details and access to guns for people like this, they become separate from the very people they try to serve. And I think we start going down a slippery slope where we look like third world countries and banana republics that rely on guns to settle every dispute. We don't want to be that way.
First of all, we're not talking about giving security details to every member of Congress. We're allowing congressmen to defend themselves when they are attacked. Second of all, I agree with you. There should be a national standard. Every single person who purchases, every single person who buys a firearm in this country goes through a federal background check if they're doing it legally. And third, the reason why people in Washington, D.C., including congressmen and regular citizens, are vulnerable is because Washington, D.C. has a different standard for concealed carry than states like Virginia, for example, where you're allowed to protect yourself. So don't say that we're going to act like a third world country when we're simply allowing people to take responsibility for their own safety when someone attacks them with a firearm, and the only way to fight back and save your life is with a gun.
You just made my point for me, Katie, when you said Virginia has a different standard than D.C. Let's everyone have one standard, including background checks, that includes mentally unstable people and all that.
We got to leave it there. We got to leave it there. There's much more we could explore in this. The Supreme Court has had a couple very important rulings on this issue the last few years, and the conversation will continue. Katie, Marianne, thank you very much.
Shannon.
Kind of a windy day in Wisconsin, Shannon, huh?
I've heard.
Blew in a new U.S. Open champion on Sunday night.
Koepka, a major champion.
I mean, he was so chill right after.
He
barely moved. Brooks Koepka is your winner of the 117th U.S. Open. That's his first major championship. Caps off a record week for the 27-year-old American from the state of Florida. Great job by Fox Sports on the four-day tournament. Really good stuff. And the folks in Wisconsin, I thought, were